Welcome back everyone, it's Mags, and if I had a nickel for every franchise starring personified video game consoles, it would only be a matter of time before those two nickels found each other. This is Superdimension Neptune vs Sega Hard Girls, a legendary crossover between Neptunia and Sega Hard Girls. If you're new here, I'm running through every Neptunia game in release order, spin-offs included, playing them for the first time. Neptunia is notorious for its wild amount of weird spin-offs, particularly between its 4th and 5th mainline games, which are a whopping 11 years apart. Going by the Japanese release date, since at the time of writing this, Neptunia 5's localization release date has yet to be announced. I assume it's happening at some point. This is the 5th Neptunia spin-off game, following an idle management sim, a strategy RPG, and 2 musos. But before we even talk about the game itself, you may be asking, what in the world is a Sega Hard Girls? Like probably many people, the existence of this Neptunia crossover game is the very first time I had heard of this franchise, and it always seemed mysterious and vague whenever I casually looked stuff up about it. Like, it's hard to tell what it's even about or what happens in it. But after finally digging deeper into it for this video, it's clear why that is. It's a franchise that got precious little actual media released for it, and even then most of that is Japanese only. It's more conceptual than anything. It was thought up and spearheaded by Sega themselves, in collaboration with the anime and video game focused magazine publisher Dengeki Bunko. The idea is simple. What if Sega video game consoles, Sega hardware, was personified? It's a franchise about the antics of these girls and shoving in as many Sega references as humanly possible, like one huge love letter. Except Sega was actually involved, so it's more like propaganda, but don't worry about it. There was an official website launch for it in 2012, which posted about and advertised all the releases and movements of the Sega Hard Girls. It has character bios for most characters that have been conceived for the project, and there are a lot. It's like what often happens when someone has a bunch of OCs made but not much of an actual story to put them into. That's basically this franchise. One of the very first, if not the very first, actual release of something related to Sega Hard Girls was in 2012, for a collaboration event in the game Samurai and Dragons, a Japanese exclusive game for the PS Vita. The website specifically shows off the inclusion of 3 of the girls, Sega Saturn, Dreamcast, and Mega Drive, but there were a bunch of others as well, including some that come from a special subdivision of the project focused on Sega arcade hardware. That division was quickly scrapped, with the speculation being because there were just way too many characters already. So this is the only time the arcade-based girls were actually used for anything. The first real standalone piece of Sega Hard Girls media was released shortly afterwards in 2013 in the form of a light novel consisting of 2 volumes. Unfortunately, these were never translated, neither officially nor unofficially as far as I can find, or else I totally would have read them. So I really don't know what the story of these light novels are. It could be more serious, it could include a lot of the cast, it could include a lot of lore and information, or it could be none of that and just be a very silly thing like the other Sega Hard Girl stuff we'll talk about. Because what we did get officially in English was a DVD release of the Sega Hard Girls anime series, distributed by Discotech in North America, that originally aired in 2013 into 2014. There are 13 episodes and an OVA, and the episodes are only about half the length of a standard anime, being around 11 to 12 minutes each, so it's a super short and easy watch. This is just about the only standalone piece of Sega Hard Girls media that there officially is in English, so it's no wonder why the Neptunia crossover game of all things seems to be how most people know about it. The anime follows 3 of the Sega Hard Girls, who fill the roles of the cliché trio: the relatively normal and level-headed one, the carefree, fun, and ditzy one, and the brainy and reserved one. These are, respectively, Sega Saturn, Dreamcast, and Mega Drive, the same 3 advertised on the website for their inclusion in Samurai and Dragons. And to give you a sneak peek, they're also 3 of the 4 that star in the Neptunia game. They really must be favorites for the project. In the anime, they're all attending a high school called Segagaga Academy, and it starts on their first day. They talk as if it's an entire school with many other students, but it otherwise doesn't even try to actually give you that impression. They might as well be the only students in the school. This show does not care about that kind of logic or consistency, and I say that lovingly. It's a total gag anime, and also probably made cheaply, and it embraces that. To graduate, they need to earn medals, which is done by completing certain challenges administered by their teacher, known as Center, who's only ever seen remotely, appearing as a digital pixelated rabbit. The challenges involve the girls jumping into the virtual worlds of different Sega games. The anime is 3D, and there are 2 models for each girl. They're in chibi forms in the real world, and when they go into a video game, they transform to have more normal proportions. Like, they get a whole transformation sequence and everything. And that's it. You know the basic setup, and the rest is just shenanigans ensue. Obviously, since Sega themselves are involved in this, they have full rights to use just about anything and everything Sega, and dear lord, they take full advantage of it. The sheer amount of references, from blink and you miss it sight gags, to passing dialogue, and everything in between is mind-boggling. Admittedly, my familiarity with Sega's catalog is not very high. I've mostly just played a fair amount of Sonic games, with everything else I know just being through pop culture osmosis, but this show's dedication to showing off everything Sega has done and playing around with it made me want to play more of their stuff, so I think that speaks for itself. Like, have I played Golden Axe? No, I've only ever heard about it in passing. But even still, this conversation of Saturn talking about boys and Mega Drive misinterpreting her tastes and recommending her the old guy from Golden Axe, much to Saturn's horror, is incredible stuff. That's kind of this show's humor. Every 1 to 2 episodes is focused on a different Sega game. For example, the first one they go into is Virtua Fighter, and their challenge is to work together to win 100 battles, where each of them get one single special fighting move to use. Something I love about this show is that it is not afraid to mix and match art styles. They use assets that look like they were just ripped straight from the actual games, and I wouldn't be surprised at all if that's actually what's happening for a lot of them. The Space Channel 5 segments are even in 4x3 with blurry bars to fill up the rest of the screen, just for the full authentic effect. So you have low poly and low res Ulala dancing alongside the HD smoothly animated Sega Hard Girls. It looks like a fever dream, and I love it. The actual pre-existing Sega characters from the games don't have any unique dialogue or very much interaction with the Sega Hard Girls, presumably either to save on costs or to not jeopardize the authenticity of the original characters, but honestly that just adds to the surreal effect. Things are just happening, like Ulala dancing and singing as she normally would in Space Channel 5, with almost no acknowledgement to the Sega Hard Girls being there, and they just gotta go with it. And then Jeffrey McWild from Virtua Fighter shows up, just because he can. No fanfare, no hello, just suplexes and basic I win voice lines. And then he also suplexes the aforementioned old guy from Golden Axe. There's an episode where they go into the game Border Break, which has a realistic art style with mechs and guns. It's shot like one of those old sketches people used to make in Halo, and it's so charming. Like, this is just a straight up red versus blue episode, but also with anime girls. And also Dr. Eggman is there, don't worry about it. It's a really good turn your brain off and enjoy the ride kind of show, and I'd imagine someone who's actually engaged with these Sega IPs more than I have would get even more out of it. You will see references to some of the other Sega Hard Girls thrown in here too, namely in episode 7, which is all about a special competition the school is hosting. The competition itself is never actually shown, the entire episode just riffs on all the other members who will be participating, and of course it's all Sega characters, but they use that opportunity to also show off some of the other Sega Hard Girls, like Game Gear and Mega CD. I mentioned there was an OVA too. I think the OVA was only ever in the Japanese version, since the listing for the Discotech North American release only specifies 13 episodes, and the OVA had never been uploaded with a translation anywhere online that I could find, except for when some absolute heroes took it on as a project in 2022 and uploaded it with embedded subtitles to YouTube. I'm hesitant to even say that much lest it get taken down, so if you really want to find it, it's out there. The OVA is a few minutes longer than the other episodes, a whopping 15 minutes this time. Crazy, I know. The plot revolves around another special competition hosted by the school, but this time all the participants actually appear as characters, and the episode is all of them competing. In addition to the main 3, there are 4 other Sega Hard Girls in this episode: Sega Mark III, Mega Drive 2, Robo Pitcher, and Master System. There's also a gag that the V Saturn and High Saturn are locked out of the school while the competition is happening, and they're guys that are just straight up represented as the hardware. From my understanding, these models were just alternate models of the Saturn that were released after the original one. All in all, a really fun series. It didn't overstay its welcome and had plenty of good character moments between the main 3 girls, and above all, it's a kind of silly that I enjoyed, even not being all that familiar with a lot of Sega games. And so, with Sega Hard Girls being established, how about that Neptunia crossover? Superdimension Neptune vs. Sega Hard Girls has nothing to do with the actual Superdimension, which is the name for the alternate dimension that Neptunia 1 takes place in. It might just be a weird localization thing, or maybe they just thought it sounded cool without realizing it already had a meaning in the series, who knows. After all, this is right in the middle of where the series just started throwing alternate dimension titles in there just for the hell of it, like Mega Dimension, Mega Tagmension, and soon Cyber Dimension. So sure, why not? Superdimension. With that being said, this is like most of the other spin-offs so far, where it's clearly just contained in its own little alternate universe bubble. And despite the title, Neptune is not the protagonist this time around. That's right, we get 2 games in a row where a side character gets a protagonist spotlight, and 3rd overall. The protagonist in this one is IF, and she gets a sick new design. I love this outfit for her. She also gets a motorcycle because she's just that cool. IF in this world is, of course, a lone adventurer. The only company she has or wants is her trusty motorcycle that she cares about dearly. This world is basically a wasteland, having been ruined by endless conflict in the past. IF has heard wind of a legendary library that contains the entire history of the world, and the game opens with her finally finding it. Before she can even enter, though, an unfamiliar girl falls from the sky, and has amnesia. Yeah, this is Neptunia, alright. She's unconscious for a while, so IF figures she'll take her into the library with her to let her rest. There, she meets the curator of the library, who is, of course, surprise surprise, Histwire. But it's Ultra Dimension Histy, actually, the tiny one. The library is technically public, despite being so important and not having any visitors in a long time, so she doesn't have any problem letting IF roam around and look at everything. It's not too long, though, before Histy has to let it slip that there's a problem with the library. For some reason, history is disappearing, and like, a lot of it. If too much history disappears, it won't be able to correct itself, and the entirety of time and therefore existence will cease to be. The mysterious girl is Sega, a literal representation of Sega, basically a maker character in spirit, comparable to the generals in Hyper Devotion. Her design is like a mishmash of Sonic the Hedgehog and Hatsune Miku. I love her ring bracelets and stupid big red Sonic shoes, she's adorable. She's also very pushy. She still can't remember anything, but she does know that she has a mission, and most of the plot is driven by her demanding that she really needs to do this thing, for reasons she can't remember, and drags IF along by the arm. Histy reluctantly asks if IF can help her fix time. Thankfully, she agrees, because Histy already took the liberty to modify IF's bike with time travel functionality without her permission. Did I mention that IF is very protective of her bike? Segami insists on going with her because she detects that it's something she needs to do. And so, IF and Segami set off to fix and restore history. Yes, this game is about time travel, and wow, it does not care that much about making it make sense. Time travel stories are already super difficult to get right logically, so I don't want to be nitpicky about it, and this game takes great pains to basically tell you, don't worry about it, we don't care, just go with it. Histy explains that time is malleable and changing things in the past isn't a problem and likely would still result in the same or similar outcomes in the present. IF brings up the argument of the classic paradox of going back in time to kill your parents. Wouldn't you then have never been born? Histy explains that time would fix itself by just making you be born from another set of parents. I have many thoughts about how it wouldn't work like that, like the fact that there would still be one less couple in the world, so somebody still won't end up being born. And if you're born from a different set of parents, that would probably alter your entire personality and life trajectory by being in a different environment, and therefore you would have a vastly different effect on the world around you, but you know, it's Neptunia, we're not supposed to be worrying about these things. Basically, anything goes. They even travel back to the same exact moments that they've already traveled to before, with no worry or mention about potential duplicates of themselves being in the same place at the same time. Big ball of timey-wimey stuff rules going on here. There are 4 main eras you can travel to, all based on eras of Sega consoles. In each era, the Sega hard girl of that era is in a fierce battle with the Pleneptune goddess of that era, since Pleneptune represents Sega. Like I mentioned before, 3 out of the 4 hard girls here are literally just the same 3 that were in the anime, yet again. And on the Neptunia side of things, yeah, throughout the series there have been a lot of new Pleneptune goddesses introduced. So to fit the Sega theme, they literally pit all of them against the Sega hard girls. The eras, of course, go in real chronological order based on when the respective consoles came out. The first era is the Mega Drive era, where Mega Drive is fighting with Plutia. In the main series, Plutia is from the Ultra Dimension, where she was the very first, and only, goddess of the newly formed Pleneptune, so that makes sense. For the North American folks, hi, I'm North American folks, the Mega Drive is the Genesis, which Sega Hard Girls actually created an entirely separate character for, designed to be a stereotypical American nicknamed Jenny. Incredible, I love it. Next is the Sega Saturn era, where Sega Saturn is fighting with Neptune. The Sega Neptune was a console planned to be the successor to the Saturn that never actually ended up coming out, so close enough, that makes sense too. After that is the Game Gear era, where Game Gear is pitted against Nepgear. Of course, they both literally represent the same console. And hey, Game Gear wasn't in the anime except for some small cameos and references, so I love getting to see her here. Her design is really good. And last, of course, is the Dreamcast era, where Dreamcast is fighting with Uzume. They, again, represent the same console. Each era, plus the library itself in the present day, have their own little menu-based hubs with the iconic chibi NPCs to interact with, which I love. chirpers as the series has called them in the past. While there are only 4 Sega Hard Girls that the main game focuses on, a lot of the other ones appear here as chirpers. There are a healthy amount of side events that open up with them throughout the game too, that give you little banter and conversations with them. It's great getting to see other Sega Hard Girls get some love and attention. In the story, the conclusion that's drawn is that all of the fighting is what ultimately led to the present day being the desolate wasteland that it is. Ultimately, the game is about trying to figure out why the Hard Girls are so insistent on fighting the goddesses and stopping them. IF assumes that changing history to such an extent would be bad though, just out of principle, so she's generally against Segami's tampering and only goes along reluctantly. Oh, also, Neptune possessed IF Spike. I don't know how to say that more naturally, but Neptune is quite literally along for the ride, and she's not afraid to let everyone know. Big ball of timey-wimey stuff incoming. This Neptune is the Neptune from the Sega Saturn era. The first batch of early game quests are all linear, which is different from what comes later, and all take place in the Sega Saturn era. Neptune disappears as a result of history going wonky during one of their trips to the Saturn era, and when they get back to the library, Neptune managed to be saved by possessing IF Spike, which is now purple, much to IF's shock and horror. So there's a main trio of Neptune, being Neptune and also being IF Spike, Segami, who can come off as pushy and mean, and IF, who just wants to be left alone and is visibly done with everyone's BS. It's a really entertaining dynamic, honestly. I love all of them together. It's a lot of chaotic banter and insulting each other, but you know they all love each other deep down, even if they themselves don't realize it. Also, I do like Segami's personality as it's portrayed in this game, but I have read that they did make her a little more mean than she was originally. Originally, she was more adorable and cutesy, but I guess they screwed with that feel in the translation. The structure of this game is actually a lot like the original HDN1 of all things. Each era has its own main plotline, which you progress by accepting their respective missions, so you're free to progress any of them in whichever order you want. A lot like the storylines of the 4 landmasses in the first Neptunia game. Mechanically though, they work like the more familiar guild side quests in the other games, where you can accept a mission, go and fulfill the requirements, then come back and turn it in. So main missions and side missions alike work the same way in this game, but you'll notice that there's a counter next to each one. You can only accept one mission at a time, and when you go to turn it in, all mission counters decrease by 1. When a mission hits 0, it expires and disappears. When a mission disappears, well, there's one other big plot point I gotta talk about. The Time Eater. This game is not only a time travel story, but also a time loop story. This might be considered spoilers, but the game reveals its hand pretty early on, and it's a huge part of the main gameplay loop. So, the thing that's been making time disappear is the Time Eater. Yeah, it's just a creature that eats time. That's it. That's the big bad. It's hiding out right in the library, so at any point you can choose to go fight it. Defeating it, of course, will fix history, but it is also very strong, so you're obviously not meant to kill it early on. And every time a mission expires, it strengthens the Time Eater even more. They'll give it new skills and passive effects like more stats, regen abilities, resistances, you name it. Each mission has a star ranking, which is an indication of how important it is in terms of its effect on history. Functionally, that's just how much it affects the Time Eater when it expires. A mission with more stars will give more skills and or stronger skills to the Time Eater. You are not meant to clear all the missions in one go. They will all expire on you multiple times throughout the course of the story. When everything expires and there are no missions left anymore, you'll be forced into an encounter with the Time Eater as it is. If and when you lose, you'll start over. All the missions you missed due to expiry will reappear, and missions you've already cleared won't, so you're free to just pick things back up exactly how they were. Nothing is actually missable. You can also, again, choose to fight the Time Eater anytime you want. It'll be weaker if you go for it sooner rather than later in a given loop, since less missions will have expired and given it buffs. If you lose, the loop still resets, so it also functions as a simple reset on demand option. In fact, even if you win, it still functions that way, because the only time the game actually ends and boots you into New Game Plus is if you get the true ending, which you do not get by just beating the Time Eater anytime. The loop will just reset like normal, even if you win. The loop structure is largely inconsequential since you can just pick right back up from where you left off when you start over, but it's still neat thematically. And it does offer some urgency since different missions have different counters, so you can prioritize missions that'll expire sooner. And the game gives you reasons to actually consider that because missions are really cool in how they progress the game, in terms of how much content you get access to just by completing side missions. But before I get into all that, let's talk about the actual gameplay itself. The gameplay on a basic level is actually very similar to the main series. It's turn-based combat with field movement, and it even has an AP-like system for all my AP fans out there. Trust me, I'm one of them. It's not built on combos though, like in the main games. You just have one basic attack and then your SP skills. Similarly to Mark II, SP is charged in this game. Every individual attack you dish out or receive will charge 2 SP, and everybody has a max of 1000. It completely carries between battles. You'll always be left with the same amount of SP you ended off at, even when you exit dungeons and such. Also, similarly to Mark II, there's that AP-like system. In this game, it's called AG, and it's a meter. Every action you take, whether it be a basic attack using an SP skill or using an item, fills up the AG meter by a certain amount. You can do as many things as you'd like in one given turn as long as the meter isn't too full. You can be pretty strategic with it because the AG meter also affects your wait time between turns. You can choose to end your turn at any time by defending, and so the less full the meter is when you end your turn, the less of a wait there is until your next turn. Of course, that'll also reset your movement range, which obviously doesn't happen in the middle of a turn. There's a red danger zone near the top of the meter, and your turn automatically ends without defending if you get up there. Different actions raise the meter by different amounts. Even just moving raises it a little bit, both at the beginning of your turn or after any action you take, so it encourages good positioning by moving as little as possible. For basic attacks, there aren't unique ranges for different characters like usual. Everyone just has a radius around them where you can attack any enemy of your choice within that radius. There's one other type of attack completely new to this game that's super cool. You can do charged attacks. Each character has a unique one where you can hold down the attack button to completely fill the rest of the remaining AG meter to use it. Damage is based on how much of the AG meter you fill for the charged attack itself. You can also spend SP to transform, because of course you can. All of the CPU goddesses and candidates can transform into their CPU forms by using 20% of their max SP, which is just 200 SP, where they get increased stats. The Sega Hard Girls can't transform, unfortunately, but Sega has an interesting ability to transform into any of the Sega Hard Girls that you've recruited. So you can have 2 of the same Hard Girl on the battlefield if you want. The Hard Girl stats will combine with Segami's stats when she's transformed, and she'll be able to use basically any skill that the Hard Girl has access to. And also notice that I left IF out of the group of people that can't transform. I don't think it's ever explained how or why she can do this, but screw it, it's an alternate scenario. IF can just do this, because she's just that cool. IF gets her own transformation and powered up form, called her Awakening form, that has this fiery red theme going on. It's awesome. During combat, various gems will randomly appear in the sky that you can jump to get. Because oh yeah, you can jump in combat. Mostly they just heal some HP and SP, but I found them pretty inconsequential. They're not that potent, and they're pretty uncommon. It's nice if one does happen to be there and you can get some use out of it, but it's not something I ended up ever actively thinking about. The weaker HP and SP healing ones can be gotten at any time, but there are also stronger HP and SP healing ones that you need to be transformed to get. But there's one particular gem that's very useful and integral to the combat system. See, the AG meter is strongly related to a new mechanic unique to this game, Fever Mode. Every hit you land on enemies charges up the fever gauge. Like SP, it's retained between battles and doesn't reset itself. When it hits 100%, a special gem will appear in the center of the arena, and getting it will activate Fever Mode. Fever Mode is busted. Everybody's stats will increase by 10%, and during Fever Mode, the enemy never gets a turn. It is your turn non-stop until the fever gauge runs out. The fever gauge will deplete based on the amount of AG you use, so moves that fill AG more like SP skills will also use up more fever gauge and deplete it quicker. There is also a special type of skill that you have access to only in Fever Mode, the EXE skills, a staple of Neptunia. EXE skills are, as always, super moves that are a lot stronger than normal SP skills. They don't cost any SP to use in this game, but they're limited in that you can only use them in Fever Mode, and they deplete a clean 25% of the fever gauge to boot, which is quite a cost. It's definitely a unique system. It kind of has the same issues I had with Mark II about SP not charging fast enough. At least in this game, SP never resets itself, so it's easier to conserve it for when you really actually need it, because it does take quite a bit to regain. It's the same with Fever Mode. The fever gauge charges slowly, so it's something you have to grind for if it's not already full. But again, you can save it for when you really want it. And even when you do activate Fever Mode, if you don't use the entirety of the fever gauge before the battle ends, it'll stay at the same percent it left off on. I still found it pretty fun to use. You have to optimize the best way to use the Fever Mode time that you have to take full advantage of it, like setting up buffs or debuffs beforehand so you don't expend the gauge using them during Fever Mode and can just focus on attacking. And the fact that the enemy never gets a turn during it means that you can set up and fire off a lot of crazy stuff at once. And the other unique options you have like charged attacks just make it feel that much more fleshed out. That's not all though. This game also has a class system. Each character has at least a couple of classes that can be unlocked throughout the game, on top of their starting one. It's your pretty standard affair. Each class puts a slightly different focus on different stats. In addition to your character leveling up, their class levels up individually, raising those stats further. That means changing to a new class that you haven't leveled up as much yet will make you weaker, so you'll have to grind it up. The main difference between classes though is the skills you have access to. Each class has one unique class skill that you can only use when you have that class equipped. However, different classes will give you different common skills as you level them up, and so once you've leveled up a class enough to learn one of those skills, it can be kept and used forever even if you swap classes. So it can be worth it to level up classes just to see what skills you'll learn. Skills work a bit differently in this game than in the other Neptunia games, and there's a bigger emphasis on them from a utility standpoint. You can't just use any skill you've learned. You have to manually equip them, and you can only equip a certain amount at a time. Initially it's only 3, with a 4th and a 5th slot being unlockable later. And unlike other games, this includes not only skills you use in battle, but also passive skills. This game focuses a lot on passives that you can equip to build your character certain ways, such as taking less damage than normal when defending, or recovering HP every turn. It's a cool way to make you strategize, and given the strict limitations on equipping skills, you have to really choose carefully. And then there are formations you can set. In the main Neptunia games, you can actually set your party members' starting positions on the battlefield to wherever you want. In Sega Hard Girls though, this is not the case. Instead, there are preset formations that you can choose. Each one starts your party in designated locations, but they have additional utility too. Each formation has one passive effect that it gives you during battle, like boost to certain stats. They also determine which party members can raise their lily ranks with each other. Yes, lily ranks are in Sega Hard Girls, because of course they are. Each unique pairing of characters has a lily rank with each other, which is like their affection or affinity with each other. Lily ranks are raised simply by members fighting in a battle together, but only the members that your formation dictates. Each formation has lines between certain members, and you can switch out which members are in which spots, and only those pairings will have their lily ranks raised. It's not just one battle per rank though. As usual, it takes quite a good amount of battles to raise a lily rank, but in this game lily ranks max out at only 5 instead of the usual 10. When any character maxes out their lily rank with IF, a chirper will appear in the overworld that opens up some unique missions, which is how you unlock one of the extra skill slots for each character, as well as a new class for them. For IF herself, she gets these by just maxing out her lily rank with anyone. Basically everything in this game is unlocked through missions, and it's kind of crazy how much keeps opening up as you clear them. Part of the reason for this is that the more missions you clear, the higher your overall observation level gets, and at certain thresholds, chirpers will appear that give you all kinds of stuff like new formations, so your range of options and abilities massively expands before you know it. A bunch of missions have their own rewards you get specifically for completing them, of course, but even then, those aren't just your standard items or credits. For example, missions are involved in straight up unlocking and expanding dungeons. Some dungeons get new areas and floors from certain missions, or some parts of dungeons will be closed off initially and will open up later via a chirper once you've made enough progress. And as you clear missions, more will be added to your list. One of the other types of rewards you can get from completing missions is plans. You don't have to craft plans once you get them or anything like in the other games. In Sega Hard Girls, they're just settings you can toggle on or off immediately once you get them. Some of them don't even have toggles at all and are just indicators of something that's been unlocked somewhere. The ones you can turn on and off are like the toggleable system plans that have been in other games. This includes XP and credit boosts, and it also includes my favorite, the ability to insta-kill weak encounters. And of course, there's a separate plan that then lets you get all the normal battle gains from doing that too, vastly speeding up grinding time once you're strong enough for the enemies you're using. The other plans indicate that you can find a strong enemy somewhere that wasn't there before, or that a rare material can now be gathered in a dungeon that couldn't be found before. This is the only Neptunia game that's made me want to do all of the side quests just because of the sheer amount of content you get from them. It's so easy to get lost in it, and I mean that in the best way possible. It also helps that a lot of the dungeons are super fun to explore in this game. Your movement is fast and fluid, and it's more dynamic than it's been in other games, letting you use abilities that feel great and make the dungeon layouts more versatile. One of these things is sprinting. There's no stamina meter or any nonsense like that, and you go fast. But there's also momentum that has to calm down when you stop, so there's a delay where you skid for a second. You jump farther and higher while sprinting, so there will be big gaps that require it, or straight up light platforming, and it just feels cool. There's also ropes you can climb across and crawl spaces you can enter to get to other parts of the dungeon. If an area of the dungeon on the map looks totally disconnected from the rest, chances are there's a rope or crawl space connecting it somewhere that you have to find. And lastly, you can climb walls, which adds a ton of verticality that dungeons wouldn't otherwise have. It helps make them feel super distinct from the usual Neptunia dungeons. As you'd expect by now, a lot of them are still reused from older games, but even in those cases, they still change up the layout a bit and include unique obstacles to accommodate your new moves, like these big gaps in the ravine dungeons, or crawling under the shutter in the factory dungeon. Every era has mostly the same dungeons as each other, but the layouts, again, will be slightly different in each one. It's standard at this point for the series to use the same dungeon themes multiple times in the same game, but it's cool that this one contextualizes it as being in different time periods, and you get to watch them change as time goes on. To make exploring them even more engaging, there are collectibles in every dungeon in the form of medals and baseballs. Medals are scattered all over dungeons and just give you some money when you collect them, 100 credits each to be exact. Baseballs are rarer. You get a little message pop up when all the medals in a section of the dungeon are collected, and there will be a little crown icon next to it on the dungeon list, making it easy to keep track of them. It's a small but fun incentive to just fully explore every new dungeon you come across, especially for someone like me who just likes collecting things. There are a total of 42 baseballs in the game, and collecting them all will give you a new formation. Sega Hard Girls has 3 endings you can get. Simply completing all of the main missions will lead you to the true ending. Intentionally defeating the Time Eater before then will give you the normal ending. Defeating the Time Eater during your very first scripted encounter with it will give you the bad ending, which, needless to say, is really only possible on a New Game Plus where you're super high level. New Game Plus is only accessible when getting the true ending. Any other ending will simply reset the loop like normal, keeping all of your current story progress. New Game Plus keeps all of your medals and baseballs, so while you still have to unlock every dungeon again, those collectibles won't respawn if you've already gotten them. You should do any post-game stuff you want in a New Game Plus run, because there's some exclusive stuff that only appears there. For one, there's a room at the very end of the Mega Drive Troll Ruins dungeon, the most expanded version of that dungeon, that doesn't ever open until near the end of the story in New Game Plus. There are some medals and baseballs in there. Also, New Game Plus is the only place to get the ultimate equipment for everybody. Near the end of the story, after clearing most of the missions, an event will appear on the map that opens up some interesting looking side missions. They all just require materials, but the counters are low, so you won't be able to do all of them in one go. Just fight the Time Eater to reset them and you can get all of them that way. Each of these missions opens up yet another mission that requires defeating a new strong enemy that has appeared. These are essentially post-game bosses. There's one mission for each character, and defeating them for the missions will give you that character's ultimate gear, which is far stronger than anything else in the game. There's not too much DLC in Sega Hard Girls, but the DLC that is present is pretty interesting. As usual, some DLC that was in the Vita version is baked into the game automatically for free. One of those is an extra event, purely for funsies, that's only accessible in New Game Plus. It'll just be right in the library. It also includes some special equipment. The paid DLC includes 2 new classes, one for IF and one for Segami, as well as a bunch of plans to make your life easier. There's one that increases credits earned and one that increases XP earned, even on top of the base game plans for those that already exist. And then there's also one that increases the fever gauge during battle faster. As far as the achievements go, they're really not too bad. There's one for getting each ending of the game, which I explained earlier. There's one for getting every character to level 99, which is super quick with the Symbol Crusher Get plan enabled. That lets you insta-kill weak encounters for all their rewards. Once I was strong enough for it, I used the enemies in the second floor of Mega Drive's Troll Ruins for it, since they give a lot of XP. There's one for maxing out every single Lily rank with every single character. Yup, we're back to doing this. But it's actually not too tedious at all in Sega Hard Girls, thankfully. There's a good formation for it called the Stormbreaker formation that has lots of Lily rank connections. Also, every character has some class that lets them learn the Love++ passive skill at some level, which increases the speed at which Lily ranks raise. For Neptune though, that skill only comes from her secret class that you get from maxing out her Lily rank with IF, so that one will be a bit slower. Toyopolis Floor 2 is a good spot to grind this out, of course with the Symbol Crusher Get plan, since it's basically just an open floor with a ton of enemies. And again, Lily ranks only go up to 5 in this game, not 10. Very painless compared to other games. Oh, there's also an achievement for using Fever Mode 100 times. That's a whole lot, but since the Fever Gauge always stays where it left off, you can just keep going into an encounter, activate Fever Mode, then escape, and the gauge will still be at 100% in your next battle, so rinse and repeat. Then there's an achievement for collecting every single medal, and another one for collecting every single baseball. Here's the thing about that. I mentioned that some dungeons expand throughout the game, Panique Cave does this once, and Toyopolis does this twice. Some others as well, but those two are the ones that matter for this, because for whatever asinine reason, they made the entirety of those dungeons reset themselves upon each expansion. In the game's eyes, you're dealing with an entirely new dungeon, not just a new part of the dungeon. So that means medals and baseballs reappear on older floors. Every medal and baseball in every version of these dungeons counts for this achievement, and for the formation you get for getting all the baseballs, which means if you don't get all those before the dungeon expands and resets, you gotta restart an entire New Game Plus to go back for those. So basically every time you visit one of those dungeons, get all of the medals and baseballs in all of the floors immediately in every era. Use a guide to make sure you haven't missed any baseballs. Again, there are 42 in total. Speaking of New Game Plus stuff, that room I mentioned in Mega Drive Troll Ruins that only opens at the end of a New Game Plus is also relevant for an achievement, not only because there are more medals and a baseball in there, but it also houses a very special strong enemy, our good friend Delphinus. And there is an achievement for defeating her. Delphinus is extremely strong. Even with max leveled characters, you're going to have a rough time. For this fight, a little abuse of mechanics is in order. Mega Drive has an insane unique class skill called Charge, where she can triple the damage of anyone's next attack. Dreamcast's EXE skill does a lot of damage, and has a ton of hits in it, a whopping 33. Since Segami's stats combine with your other Hard Girl stats when she transforms, you're gonna want to use Segami with her ultimate equipment transforming into Dreamcast for this for more stats. She's based on strength, so use the formation skill that gives you plus 300 strength, which is a ridiculous boost and borderline required to do any damage with physical attacks in this fight. And that's basically the only setup you need. Make sure you have your Fever Gauge charged, go into the battle with only Mega Drive and Segami so you don't waste Fever Gauge skipping other ally turns. Buff Segami with strength increasing items and Mega Drive's charge skill. Mega Drive also happens to have a skill called Tired that lowers enemy vitality, physical defense, so throw that on Delphinus too. Then go into Fever mode and use Dreamcast's EXE skill for a ton of damage. Fever mode should last long enough for you to cast Charge and use Dreamcast's EXE multiple times before it runs out. Delphinus should die in one Fever mode, and that's your achievement. I honestly really enjoyed Superdimension Neptune vs Sega Hard Girls. It was really cool seeing the Sega Hard Girls represented this way, especially since they've been in precious little else. And I really love the unique spins that the game puts on both the Neptunia mainline style combat and the overall mission structure and gameplay loop. It's like a mainline Neptunia with a very different flavor. I loved exploring all the dungeons with the new tools they give you, and Segami is awesome. I like her character a lot. I don't think the Sega Hard Girls have been in much of anything since this game, so it would be really cool to see something done with them again. Who knows when or if they ever will. As for the game itself, it's definitely one of the better Neptunia spin-offs so far, and it's only going for $20, which I'd say is well worth it. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more Nep, I'm gonna keep on going with the series. Next up in release order is Superdimension Neptunia for Goddesses Online, an action game meant to mimic an MMO. So if you're interested in that, feel free to like, comment, subscribe, all that good YouTube stuff. I've been Mags, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.